The day I confronted my fiancée and her family to defend my mother. My name is Daniel, I'm 33 years old, and I feel I need to write this because I know many people go through similar experiences, but rarely find the courage to talk about them. A little over a year ago, I was going through one of the most contradictory moments of my life. I was about to get married, and at the same time completely devastated by the loss of my mother. I worked at a technology company, had financial stability, my own apartment, and a seemingly perfect routine, and everyone around me didn't hesitate to say that my life was a dream. But nobody knew the emptiness I carried since the accident that took my mother from me. I've always been someone who sought to avoid conflict, always trying to please everyone, believing that this was the way to be a good person. My life before the tragedy was simple, but filled with small joys. My mother was my safe haven, the beacon of everything I considered right. She had a huge heart, and for as long as I can remember, I've seen her helping people without expecting anything in return. When I started dating my ex-fiancée, she welcomed her like a daughter. Not only her, but my ex's entire family benefited in some way. My mother contributed financially, took care of her siblings, signed important documents so they could secure loans and make plans that would otherwise have been impossible possible. I believe this was recognized with affection and gratitude. However, when she passed away, I expected everyone to do anything to honor her memory. What I experienced was exactly the opposite. It was at that moment that I realized that everything I believed to be constructed as reality was beginning to crumble before my eyes. The weeks following my mother's death were a blur. My mind couldn't organize its thoughts, and grief seemed to fill every space in my life. I was grieving, but I needed to stay functional, at least superficially, to avoid falling apart completely. My ex-fiancée seemed, at first glance, a support. She called frequently, visited, and said she understood my pain. This made me believe I was with the right person, that she would be there for me through the hardest times. So even though I was still hurt, I continued with my wedding plans. I thought that perhaps focusing on this preparation would help me fill the void and keep me afloat. For a while, I managed to convince myself that this was what I needed to do. However, small actions began to bother me. Sarcastic comments about my mother, jokes about me being too clingy, and I, always trying to avoid conflict, ignored them all. Each small provocation seemed harmless in isolation, but added together, they formed a chain that silently eroded my patience. And this accumulated tension eventually exploded at the engagement party, which was supposed to be a time of celebration and joy. The party was organized by her family, at the house my mother had helped finance. I was anxious, my heart heavy with a mixture of longing and a feeling that something wasn't right. During the speech, my ex-fiancée's parents started making jokes about my mother, calling her meddlesome, claiming she meddling in everything, and laughing as if it were normal. I froze. I looked around and saw forced laughter, uncomfortable stares. There they were, mocking the woman who had done so much for them, mocking the one I loved most. My stomach churned, my head spun. I realized in that instant that all my beliefs about the good nature of these people were an illusion. I stood motionless, my hands trembling, my throat dry. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, that someone would soon realize the absurdity and change the subject. But with each new joke, each mocking laugh, I felt my patience wearing thin. I looked at my fiancée expecting some sign of indignation, any indication that she also thought it was wrong. But what I saw was a smile that broke me in two. It was as if she were having fun, as if it were all just a funny moment to elicit laughter. In that instant, I knew something had broken inside me. The image I had of her shattered before my eyes. I don't remember exactly how I got up, but suddenly I was standing, holding the microphone. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. I felt all eyes turned to me, some surprised, some curious, some clearly uncomfortable. I took a deep breath and began to speak. I spoke. about my mother, about everything she had done for that family, about details that half the room probably couldn't even imagine. How many times she had helped financially, how many nights she had stayed up looking after my ex-fiancé's siblings so they could go out and have fun. I finished by saying with all the firmness I could muster that there was no way I was going to marry someone who would allow my mother's memory to be disrespected. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in months, I felt I was doing the right thing. The reaction was immediate. My ex-fiancée tried to grab the microphone from my hands, her parents started accusing me of exaggerating, and some relatives just shook their heads in disapproval. I saw in their eyes the anger that I had shattered the perfect charade of the happy family, but I didn't care anymore. My focus was on defending my mother, on making it clear that I would never allow her name to be trampled on. Some friends stared at me. In surprise, others smiled discreetly as if thinking, finally he stood up for himself. My decision was made in front of everyone with no turning back. The party turned into a battlefield and I didn't bother putting out the fire. I left the party without looking back, accompanied by a few cousins and my father, who was visibly emotional. In the car, the initial silence was quickly filled with an avalanche of messages and calls. Desperate messages, attempts to make me back down, screams from my ex-father-in-law, "You're ruining everything," and the tearful voice of my ex-fiancée begging me to reconsider, saying she was just joking. But as much as I felt the pressure, there was no regret in me, only a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because it was the end of a cycle I had idealized, relief because finally I could see the truth without filters. That night, I went to sleep heartbroken, but with a clear conscience, something I hadn't felt in months. The following days were a veritable emotional roller coaster. My phone was flooded with messages. Half of them were from friends, congratulating me on my courage, telling me I'd honored my mother's memory. The other half were from my ex-fiancé's family, trying to turn things around, accusing me of being ungrateful and immature, saying I'd ruined their daughter's life, conveniently ignoring all the humiliation they'd caused. My ex-fiancée called me incessantly, crying and apologizing, claiming she'd been swept up in the situation and hadn't realized what was happening. But it was too late. I remembered all the microaggressions I'd ignored, every small veiled slight against my mother that I'd pretended not to see. This was the truth I needed to face. I'd been betraying myself for too long, allowing those I loved to be disrespected. I had moments of doubt, instants when I almost succumbed to loneliness and the weight of the decision. I wondered if I was taking a hasty path, if my reaction wasn't exaggerated. But each time these doubts arose, the memory of her disdainful expression that night and the laughter echoing as they mocked the one who raised me with love brought me back to my center. My father was an essential support during this period. He told me something that stuck with me. "Son, sometimes it's better to be alone than in bad company. No one who disrespects your mother deserves a place in your future." He was right. The pain would pass, but the regret of having tolerated it would remain forever, and I didn't want to carry that weight. I decided not only to end the engagement, but to cut all ties with that family. I canceled everything: the reception hall, the honeymoon trip, the photographer, all the preparations. I lost money, of course, mainly because of the deposit for the hall, but I knew my dignity was worth much more. I asked for the ring back and, after much resistance, she finally returned it. Each step taken to break that bond seemed to give me back a piece of myself. I realized how much I had lost trying to please people who never truly respected me, and it was at that point that the real overcoming began. It wasn't just about ending an engagement, but about reclaiming who I was before I erased myself for others. I began to reconnect with myself in simple yet meaningful ways. I started visiting my mother's grave more often again, without the shame or guilt I'd previously carried. I reconnected with old friends, those who had always quietly warned me but whom I'd ignored. I allowed myself to feel everything, pain, anger, relief, without repressing anything. There were days when I cried myself to sleep, others when I laughed alone, remembering the lessons my mother taught me. Little by little, I realized that my biggest mistake had been normalizing disrespect and accepting it as a part of life. I was rebuilding my self-esteem, brick by brick, at my own pace, in my own time. As the months passed, the pressure from my ex-fiancée's family began to lessen. When they realized I wasn't going back on my decision, they started to disappear, as if they had never been a part of my life. I confess that, at first, their silence seemed strange to me, but then it became a relief. I needed peace. I needed space to rebuild myself. I started investing more in myself, in hobbies I had abandoned. Photography, hiking, moments outdoors. It was like relearning how to breathe. Each small achievement, a completed hike, a well-taken photo, a deep conversation with a friend made me feel more whole. I no longer wanted to live to please anyone. I wanted to live in a way that my mother could be proud of, even if she were no longer here. It was during this period that the greatest transformation took place within me. I realized that respecting my mother's memory was in fact respecting myself. Everything she taught me about character, dignity, and generosity couldn't be discarded for convenience. I became more selective about who I let into my life. I learned to say no, to set clear boundaries, to not tolerate disrespect disguised as a joke. I understood that those who don't respect our origins, our pain, also don't respect who we truly are. And above all, I understood that it's better to walk alone with dignity than surrounded by people who diminish and weaken us. Over time, I decided to do something I had been putting off since my mother's death. I traveled to a place she had always dreamed of visiting. It wasn't a luxurious trip, but it was full of meaning. I remember sitting by a lake, watching the sunset and feeling the wind on my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuine peace. It was as if all the burdens, the expectations of others, the invisible demands, and the need to please were dissolving in that moment. I allowed myself to feel proud of my own journey, of having put an end to a toxic situation before it consumed me completely. Upon returning home, I noticed subtle yet profound changes within myself. The longing for my mother was still present, but it was lighter, more honored. My friends noticed the difference. My expression was more serene, my gaze firmer. I was no longer the man who swallowed everything in silence to maintain peace. Now I chose my battles, always asking myself, would my mother be proud of this decision? If the answer was negative, I retreated. If positive, I moved forward, without fear. This realization transformed my life. I understood that true overcoming is not forgetting the pain, but learning to live with it in a way that strengthens us. As the months went by, my routine began to change. My circle of friends transformed. I kept fewer people close, but the ones who remained genuinely cared about me. At work, I felt more confident expressing my opinions without fear of seeming complicated. In relationships, I began to pay closer attention to how people treated others, how they handled difficult situations, because I realized that these attitudes say more about someone's character than any kind of nice words. I wasn't in a rush to start a new relationship. My priority was to maintain the peace I'd achieved and continue to honor who I was and where I came from. Recently, while talking to a close friend, he asked me if I felt any regret. For the first time, I answered without hesitation, no. I don't regret exposing the truth, defending my mother, setting boundaries where many would choose silence. Of course, the pain existed and still exists, but today I recognize that it was necessary. It showed me who was truly by my side, who respected my roots and my history. I learned that it's never too late to start over, to make difficult decisions in the name of one's own dignity. Life went on, and I went on stronger, and that strength for me is a victory that no one can ever take away. Today, I use this story as a daily reminder. Whenever I face a difficult situation, I remember the boy who once swallowed everything to keep. The peace and the man who, even trembling, stood up to defend what was right. Taking a stand is never easy, especially when it involves people we love or who were once part of our lives. But it is liberating. I know my mother, wherever she is, would have been proud. And I am proud too, not for having avoided pain, but for having faced it head-on, for having respected my history and my roots. That is the strength no one can ever take from me. As I overcame this, I began to appreciate every small achievement. I learned that true freedom doesn't come from pleasing others, but from respecting yourself. Small gestures, like visiting my mother's grave, hiking trails, photographing moments that move me, became symbols of reconstruction. Each step I took to reconnect with myself was an affirmation of who I am, what I believe, and what I will never accept. I understood that life doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. I also realized that solitude can be a gift. It gave me space to reflect, feel, and rebuild myself. Before, I feared being alone, but now I understand that solitude, when experienced well, is healthier than surrounding yourself with toxic people. I learned to identify who truly deserves to be by my side. Those who don't respect our origins, who ignore our pain, don't deserve to be part of our future. And this brought a clarity I'd never felt before. My relationship with grief has changed profoundly. The pain of loss still lingers, but it no longer paralyzes me. It has become strength, a reminder of everything my mother taught me and the example she set. I learned to cry when I needed to smile, remembering the good times, and to accept that the void will never be completely filled, but it can be honored and respected. This acceptance was the turning point. These days, I feel my life has taken a more authentic turn. My choices are guided by self-respect and the memory of my mother. I no longer submit to the will of others when I know it violates my principles. I've learned that saying no, setting boundaries, is an act of courage, and that it doesn't make me a cold or insensitive person. On the contrary, it strengthens my true relationships. That Daniel, who swallowed everything to please, has disappeared. My story of overcoming adversity has taught me that dignity is non-negotiable. It's not just about defending someone who has passed away, but about protecting one's own essence. Life has shown me in the hardest way that being firm in one's convictions is fundamental, and that sometimes the courage to face pain is worth more than any apparent comfort. Today, I live with a clear conscience, with the peace I have achieved, and with the certainty that I honored the one who loved me most in this world. If I could sum it up in a single lesson, I would say, never let the fear of losing someone make you lose yourself. Don't accept disrespect, especially when it involves someone you love or someone who can no longer defend themselves. I learned that true overcoming isn't forgetting, but rebuilding yourself brick by brick. Learning to live with pain in a way that strengthens, not destroys. Every choice, every limit I imposed, every step toward reconnecting with myself was a victory, and these victories are mine forever. Today, looking back, I see that phase as a turning point. Before, I viewed the end of the engagement as a failure, an exposure, and a source of shame. But today I understand that it was a silent victory. Many, in that situation, would have swallowed everything, gone ahead with the ceremony, and feigned happiness. I didn't. I chose a clean, genuine life, where I can look in the mirror and be proud. I achieved what many don't realize, putting my integrity above any external pressure. My life went on, and the changes were profound. My relationships became more authentic, my friendships more meaningful, my self-confidence stronger. I learned to judge people not by their words, but by their actions, their respect, and how they handled difficult times. I learned to value the peace I've gained and to honor my story every day. The pain still exists, but it's now my ally, not a prison. Today, I know that true overcoming isn't about erasing the past or pretending nothing happened, but about learning to rebuild yourself from each broken piece. It was a slow process full of bad days and relapses, but I came out on the other side more whole and complete. I've returned to dedicating myself to things that make me feel good. I've valued my true family, and I've learned to filter who deserves to be in my life. Sometimes solitude is better company than people who diminish us. It wasn't a fairy tale, it wasn't easy, but it was real. And each conscious choice, each established limit, each courageous step has profoundly transformed me. If there's one thing I want to leave as a legacy from this story, it's simple. Never let the fear of losing someone make you lose yourself. Respect yourself. Honor your roots. Defend your history and your values. Life has taught me harshly and clearly that dignity is not negotiable. Today I live with peace, a clear conscience and pride in having honored the memory of the person who loved me most in this world. This is the greatest gift I could give myself, and no one can ever take it away from me.